morning and welcome to our series Survive to Thrive, presented by Rick Fuller, the #1 team leader in the #1 team for the San Francisco Bay Area and Sac County for most recent sales according to Zillow. Rick is a national real estate coach and community leader with 4 offices, 3 in the Bay Area and 1 in Sac County. Rick also has over 1,000 5-star online reviews. I'm Christina Morales. I'm a writer and marketing specialist. And Rick is my mentor, he's my good friend, and I'm so excited that we have been doing, this is the 9th? Are we on number 9?
I cannot believe it, Christina. This is number 9. We had this crazy idea of helping the real estate community during this time, and this is, we decided to do number 10. Then people are asking for bonus webinars.
Right.
And honestly, I've just had a blast doing it. It's just been a lot of fun.
Has been fun. So this is our 9th webinar and it's about you. So it should take an hour long. And if any of you have questions along the way, please share them in the Q&A box, or if you have comments, put them in the chat box. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want to cater these topics to you and your needs. So these webinars are bite-sized pieces of what's going on in the real estate industry during this current COVID-19 pandemic. While the current condition is impacting the market, it seems that it's just speeding up what was already in the pipeline. Real estate was already moving towards these paths of technology and the things we're going to talk about, teams and technology, but all of this pandemic has just hurried everything along. So we've discussed a variety of topics so far. We've had guest speakers talking about virtual appointments, taking virtual listings, different technology tools you can use. Rick's taught us how to endure. We have that acronym. So today we're going to talk about how to pivot towards the changing market and thrive with the opportunities ahead. And today's title is The Next Market Will Bring Real Estate Technology. So basically, Rick, the way I see it is this is putting all of the pieces that you've talked about together. So we've had all these pieces. Now we have the cohesive picture for what's ahead. Am I correct in thinking that?
Well, you're absolutely right, Christina. We actually spent, I think, the first 7 webinars really just on survive. How do agents survive? How do they cut expenses? How do they do virtual tours, virtual listing, virtual buyer appointments? You interviewed our listing specialist, our buyer specialist, and we went through all of that. We talked about our 6-part strategy. If you haven't heard of that, it's called Endure, and how team members are succeeding in today's market. And now we finally get to shift. You know, we did our last webinar, or the previous webinar, number 7, on trains, trucks, and shelter in place. And it was kind of my opportunity to say, hey, there's a market to come where you're not going to have to survive, you're going to thrive. You got to get there first, right? You got to be there. You can't be unemployed or out of business by the time you get to the thrive market. And so all of those webinars, I wanted just to help agents to survive today. I want to start looking to the future and helping them pivot so they can thrive in the future.
So Rick, can you tell us how the real estate market has been changing or why it's been changing? Can you give us a little bit, even before the COVID-19 crisis, the market has been changing?
Yeah, so, you know, people often come to me and say, Rick, how's the market? And I listen to other real estate agents and they'll say, oh, the market's good. Or some will say market's bad. Or the market will say, some will say, the market's outstanding. I remember when I first got into the real estate business, the coach trainer that taught me told me to say, every time somebody asks you how the market is, say it's spectacular. And I said, well, what if it's not spectacular? It doesn't matter. Just respond back spectacular. And here's what I've learned in all of that. The market's not good. The market's not bad. The market's not spectacular. The market just changes, right? It moves. The market moves. It's not a bad market. It's not a good market. It's not a good time to sell or bad time to sell. It's just a different time, and there's different opportunities. Ken Blanchard wrote a book called Who Moved My Cheese? It's a very thin read. I've probably bought that book, Christina, maybe a dozen times, and every time a team member asks me about the market, I have them read the book, because what happens is, just like in Who Moved My Cheese, the opportunities are moved in today's market. And so if you go back to where the old cheese was, there's only crumbs. There's very little left. But there's a whole new assortment of cheese available, but you got to go to a different place. And that's kind of how the world is moving. And we've never seen, with the technology changes and with what's happening with teams, we've never seen the impact to the industry like what we're seeing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember we bought our house 18 years ago before I knew you. And it was crazy because I remember we would meet with the agent, and then we were terrible clients. We wanted to see everything that was available. So yeah, so like 3 or 4 times a week, this was before Redfin, Zillow, we would go and take all of his time. And now we have all of these resources. So how have these resources impacted how you do business?
Well, they're fundamentally changing how the whole world is doing business. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, and this is a perfect segue into our topic today, and if you've missed some of our other webinars, go back to agentsthrive.com, watch them, they're all there, or get onto our Facebook group page, Agents Thrive, on Facebook, and we post them, and a bunch of people have engaged and add additional comments, so you can watch all of those past webinars there. But really, what we're finding is that things change, not often because they're better or worse, but because they're inefficiencies, right? They're inefficiencies. Things are not as efficient. Let me give you a couple of examples, and I think you have a slide for this, Christina, if I'm not mistaken. But let's take it outside, and I'm going to tie this into real estate. So bear with me, but I got to take you on just a little bit of a journey. We believe the next market will bring teams and technology. I'm absolutely convinced there's a fork in the road, and we'll talk a little bit about why that is. So if we look at some of the inefficiencies and if inefficiencies create vacuums, I'm not talking about the what do you call the vacuum, the Kirby vacuum in your house. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about it creates a massive opportunity, kind of pushes you in, sucks you into this black hole, if you will, of opportunity. And inefficiencies create vacuums in the world, in our industry, just in life. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. Do you remember, Christina, if you wanted to watch a movie, my wife Jennifer says, hey, let's do date night tomorrow night. Well, we're under shelter in place, so that probably means we're going to rent a movie. And 10 years ago, what would you do if you wanted to rent a movie? Right? You'd go to Blockbuster, Hollywood Video. You remember, you'd rent the video. There would be a late fee, right? And it was a pain in the neck because you had to go there. Then you had to rent the movie. And then if you didn't bring it back in time, there were late fees. And then remember this, you had to rewind the movie. Remember what they had, that little sticker on it? It said, be kind, rewind, right?
Now you're dating yourself.
Yeah, that's exactly right. My kids say, VHS, Dad, what are you talking about? And so did people stop watching movies, Christina? They didn't. Like, they just watch movies differently. And the inefficiencies of the late fee, and the inefficiency of I had to rewind, and the inefficiencies of, okay, now I got to take the movie and I got to remember to put it in my car, and I got to drop it off before work or after work or whatever the deal is. There were inefficiencies in watching a movie. Now, I want you to catch this. People did not stop watching movies. They just got tired of the inefficiencies. That inefficiency created a vacuum, and that vacuum produced places like Netflix, or Hulu, or whatever other streaming service that you use. There's a vacuum created, and Netflix says, well, you could watch a movie and you don't have to return it. And you could watch a movie right now. Like whatever you want to watch, boom, you can have it in just seconds, right? And you can stream it. You don't have to go to the video store. And you don't have to return it to the video store. And it doesn't matter if you're kind or not, because you don't have to rewind it, right? That's how Netflix and streaming works. And so what we're saying is that the inefficiencies of the day, of the hour, produced a vacuum. And that vacuum was filled with a Netflix and explodes, right?
Well, even now they have Disney Plus, and while we're all sheltered in place, they're taking what was supposed to be in the theater, and they're even creating the new vacuum of there's no theaters for Disney Plus and all of their new releases. So yeah, it keeps evolving. It keeps evolving, right? And it's not going to change, right? There's going to be another thing after Netflix, and we know that. But let's look at inefficiencies in transportation. And if you're like, I thought I jumped on a real estate webinar. Yes, you did. I'm going to parallel this, so hang in there with me. Let's take inefficiencies in transportation. You know, one of my favorite movies, Christina, I probably shouldn't confess this because it will date me,
and it'll kind of give you, the kind of movies that I like. They're these slapstick comedies. And do you remember John Candy and Steve Martin in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Do you remember that movie?
Yes.
I mean, it's just hilarious. Well, there's a scene in that movie where Steve Martin is trying to hail down a cab. And remember, Kevin Bacon is across the street, right? And they both identify the same cab, and then there's this massive race for this cab. Are you remembering this story? And they're both running, and John Candy trips over Steve Martin trips over somebody's luggage, and Kevin Bacon gets caught up with some people that kind of block his way, and they're both racing, and finally they get to the cab, and Kevin Bacon gets the cab, and Steve Martin does, right? And eventually John Candy's in the cab, right? And so here's the point. There were inefficiencies in transportation. That was a lot of work to get that cab in New York City. You never knew when the next cab was going to appear. I was in New York City in October, and I looked for a cab, and you didn't know when it was going to appear. You would hope it comes around the corner, but it doesn't always do that. And you don't know how long it's going to take, and you really don't know how much it's going to cost. But today we wouldn't do that. We were in Las Vegas doing a real estate mastermind, and man, we just relied on Uber. And so everything we did was Uber. Christina, I knew exactly when the car was going to get there. I knew the license plate number of the car and the driver's name. Christina, I knew exactly how much it was going to cost and when I was expected to arrive. You see, the inefficiencies of yellow cab created this Uber world that we live in. And you could say Uber, you could say Lyft, ride sharing, right? It's changing the world. In our county, and I know I have people all over the country on these webinars, but in our county, our actual transportation authority is looking at creating buses that are all controlled by the mobile phone, and it's all autonomous. You can just hop in that bus, and that takes you right to your destination. There's no more bus stop. It picks you up, it drops you off, and that's with our county. And by the time it gets to government, right, it's already kind of made its way through technology and economies and so forth, and government's kind of the last people to jump on it. And we're already seeing some of those options. And so the inefficiencies of the yellow cab company created a vacuum. And that vacuum was filled with these technology companies like Uber and Lyft. And now what's amazing is that the number one provider of rides and transportation owns no cars. So the world is changing. It was funny, I was telling this story and I went into much more detail about yellow cab, and somebody was in the audience, and I was speaking in Fort Myers, Florida. And somebody was in the audience, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Rick, I got to tell you, I owned yellow cabs. I'm from New York, New Jersey, New York. I owned yellow cabs." He says, "I was at that yellow cab convention when they said, hey, everything's going to be great. We have a bright future ahead of us. Hang in there. It's going to be awesome." This was before Uber and Lyft really took off. And what ended up happening is it really devastated their business, right? And so the world is changing, and these inefficiencies create vacuums. Let's take this inefficiency, and I'll start tying it to real estate. I remember, I've been in the industry now for 16 years. And I remember when I first started in the industry, we have 20 buyer specialists right now, and multiple real estate coaches, and lead buyer specialists, and lead listing specialists. But at that time, it was just me. And do you remember the Thomas Brothers map? Because I remember taking, maybe you're
I'm older than you.
So in real estate, you had the Thomas Brothers map, right? And the idea was that you'd go to a certain section, you go to a certain map, and then it was kind of cross-sectioned out, and you would identify where you're going to take your clients. And you actually get a highlighter, Christina, and I would actually take a copy of the Thomas Brothers map. It kind of came in a book.
Oh no.
I roll bound. I'd make a copy of it. And if you wanted to look at homes, I would take you and Vince out to look at homes, and I would take a copy of my map, and I would use a yellow highlighter, and I'd put number 1, and then I would highlight every direction I was going to go, all the streets I was going to take. Then I put number 2 and number 3. Today, if you think about how the world is changing, that inefficiency, right, wasn't needed. And today there's an app called Wheeze. And Wheeze, I think, is tapping into what I call the fourth industrial revolution, which is really the artificial intelligence really advising us. You know, instead of us telling technology what to do, it's technology telling us what to do. For example, if you have the Wheeze app going and you're driving down the freeway and there's a traffic accident, it'll say, Rick, there's a traffic accident up ahead. Take Willow Pass Road. Avoid Highway 4. It'll say, Rick, take the railroad off-ramp and avoid 242 and go down Kirker Pass. Like, it knows these things. Or it'll say, there's weather up ahead, or there's a police activity up ahead. Like, this technology recognizes. So the inefficiencies of me putting out the map, making a copy of it, use the highlighter and listen. Some of you are on these, I'm looking at this webinar, we got a lot of people on the call. A lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. You did the exact same thing with the Thomas Brothers map as I did. And now we would simply plug in the address and Wheeze would not only get us there, but it would give us guidance and direction. Instead of us just simply telling technology what to do, technology is now responding back to us and say, here's what I suggest that you do. And here's what roads I suggest that you take and avoid and so forth. And so these inefficiencies create vacuums. Let's do one more just as an example. About 10 years ago, I took my family to Washington, D.C. At that point, I had 2 daughters and my third was just born. She was literally in a stroller. We had never been to Washington, D.C. We've homeschooled our kids from the very beginning. And all 3 of my daughters, we've homeschooled. And we wanted to take them to Washington, D.C., walk through the Capitol, walk through the Rayburn Building, Library of Congress, the monuments, the Smithsonian's. And so Washington, D.C., if you've never been there, it's got some pretty rough neighborhoods. It's got some pretty sketchy parts. And we went to a travel agent to give us advice on where to stay and where to go and what we wanted to do. And I would argue that probably most of the people that are watching this webinar, the last time you traveled, you did not go to a travel agent. And there were some inefficiencies with that. For example, you'd say, can I see pictures? And they would have to, find pictures and send you the pictures of the hotel. And today, what would you do? You jump on Expedia and you just kind of click through all the pictures immediately. And if you didn't like that hotel, they would have to go back as a travel agent and find another hotel or find another rental car or find another flight and instead of that, what's happening now is that, you just go on and you click on the next flight or the next hotel or the next rental car, right? It's immediate. And the inefficiencies of that travel agent created things like Expedia. Back then you would say, Christina, as my travel agent, what do you think of this place? And you would get one opinion on the quality of that hotel or the quality of that rental car company. But today you'd read reviews, well, you'd get thousands of opinions, right? So the inefficiencies create vacuums, and now we have something called Expedia. So do you know the founder of Expedia, Christina, which changed fundamentally the role of the travel agent to online traveling? The founder of Expedia, do you know what they also founded?
No.
The founder of Expedia's name is Rich Barton. Founded Expedia, was on the board for Netflix, also founded a company by the name of Glassdoor, and the company that you probably are aware that he funded and founded and started and is currently the CEO of is a company called Zillow.
Wow.
And Zillow, the term Zillow was the idea of Zillow, the actual word really is the term Zillow is a zillion pillows. That's kind of where that came from, Zillow. Really?
Okay.
And so he founded Zillow. And so now we begin to see this correlation between the technology and real estate and how things are beginning to change. And so all of that to say, as an industry, as an economy, inefficiencies create vacuums, and vacuums produce opportunities, and opportunities produce major companies that fundamentally change our world.
And it seems like these inefficiencies and the solutions, it changes the direction of what the consumer wants because these weren't working. And so the consumer, I never thought Uber would work. I never thought in a million years. Mom says when you're 5, don't talk to strangers, don't get into a stranger's car.
Yeah.
And
now you hail them down.
It's crazy. Like, it still boggles my mind.
Yeah.
But it's the experience. It's all about consumer experience.
That's exactly right. And so what you think about it is, go back to Netflix. Did people stop watching movies? No, they just watch movies different. Did people stop traveling? Think about Expedia. No, they didn't stop. They just travel differently today. Did people stop taking public transportation or rideshare? No, they just do it different today, right? All of these things. Did people stop using maps today? No, people still use maps, probably GPS more frequently now than ever. They're still using maps, but they do it differently. The inefficiencies create vacuums. And you know, the second thing that inefficiencies create is they create a poor customer experience. Poor customer experience. And you know, I had a friend at one time that owned a restaurant, and I went in just to patronize their restaurant, support them. Inefficiencies create this poor experience. And I had a friend that owned a restaurant. We went in there, and my friend was the only person working. I'll never forget this. And we went in there for breakfast, and my friend greeted us. Our friend brought us water, and then eventually, I think, orange juice, and then took our order. And all that was working out okay until there was a second customer, right? Until there was a second customer, and then a third customer, and then a fourth customer. And my friend, who attempted to be, you know, the greeter and the waitress and the chef, trying to juggle all of those, it is impossible for them to create a good quality experience. So inefficiencies create a poor experience. Think about your doctor, right? You go to the doctor, you have front desk staff, right? They're confirming your appointment. And then you meet with maybe the nurse practitioner and does some of the vitals and some of the things that only the nurse practitioner can do. And then you meet with the doctor. You might have been in the doctor's office for a good hour. You meet with the doctor for about 6 minutes. The doctor comes in. You know, I always laugh because, you know, they'll have front row parking reserved for the doctor, and the parking for the patient is way in the back. And I'm thinking, the doctor's generally pretty healthy. It's the patient that needs to have the front row parking, not the doctor. But you think about it, that if all you had was one doctor, right? You met with the doctor when you walked in. The doctor did all of your vitals. The doctor then gave you the advice. The doctor then scheduled your follow-up appointment and made your prescription. The moment another customer comes in, the moment another patient comes in, the doctor is going to create a poor customer experience, right? Because they just can't do it all. And frankly, it's not a good use of their time. The doctor comes in and meets with you for 5 to 7 minutes, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and yet your overall visit was an hour to the doctor's. What I'm saying is that inefficiencies, when we don't operate efficiently, inefficiencies produce not only a vacuum, but they produce a poor customer experience. All right, so let's kind of parallel this to, you know, underperformance. So the next thing I want to share with you is that inefficiencies create underperformance. Let's say a football team, for example, that only has one quarterback, right? They're competing with 11 on the other side of the field. In years past, it's kind of felt like that was the Oakland Raiders. We're from the San Francisco Bay Area, like, you know, and they would get killed. They would get demolished, right? I'm a 49er fan, so I can say that. And a football team with only a quarterback cannot compete. Inefficiencies create underperformance. Take, for example, a car with a flat tire. Everything else on that car may be running optimally. The engine, the transmission, right? Everything could just be running perfectly. But if it has one flat tire, it damages the performance of the whole vehicle. It's underperforming. I see some people are chiming in. Go Raiders! What's up, Jesus? It creates an underperformance, right? You could see that as the car has one flat tire. In other words, inefficiencies, a flat tire, create underperformance. A contractor that shows up to build your house and all they have is a hammer and a saw. It's inefficiency today compared to one that shows up with a table saw and a nail gun, right? So these inefficiencies create a poor experience. Let's say in our industry, remember before DocuSign? And before DocuSign, you would need something signed. Maybe you had an offer, maybe you had a listing agreement, or maybe there was a disclosure that you need to have reviewed. And before DocuSign or digital signatures, you would literally go and you'd meet with the husband, and you'd meet with the wife, and you go back to the office and fax it into the other agent. Maybe something was missed, it'd come right back to you, go back to meeting with the husband, back to meeting with the wife. You know, heaven forbid there were more parties, you know, and you've got other buyers on that transaction, or other the sellers on the transaction, and you could spend all day just collecting signatures. And that inefficiency of collecting signatures created a vacuum, and that vacuum created an opportunity for digital signatures, where you take one document, you upload it to the cloud, and then everybody goes in and signs it. Buyer signs it, seller signs it, the agent sign it, the broker sign it, everybody signs it. And it's one document uploaded to the cloud that everyone can sign. Before that, the inefficiencies created underperformance. You just couldn't perform optimally without these technologies.
With Joe, last time we were talking about the cost of acquisition. And so a poor customer experience negates that. So it's cheaper to keep your clients than to find new ones. And so giving them a great experience is not only the right thing to do, but it's also cost efficient for your business.
And one happy customer who leaves a review begets another happy customer.
Right.
And so then you multiply that. You mentioned, you know, we're nearly at 1,000 five-star reviews. Those are 1,000 happy customers that we've had the privilege of serving. That's how kind of we look at it. We look at it as serving our clients. And that helps us produce more happy customers. Last year, we rounded off the year right around 130 million in sales. Those customers that left reviews beget or generated or procured new customers for our real estate team. And so you're absolutely right, taking great care of your customers and removing those inefficiencies is critical. And inefficiencies create a vacuum. Inefficiencies create a poor experience. Inefficiencies create underperformance. So let's now kind of take it to the real estate industry. And you know, Christina, the real estate agent, what I call the solo agent, the real estate agent has been operating the same way for nearly 100 years as a solo agent.
Wow.
Now you think about a real estate agent, you think about how much has changed. The National Association of Realtor Code of Ethics was initiated almost about 100 years ago, a century old for the NAR Code of Ethics. So we've been operating relatively the same way as a solo agent for 100 years. The same agent represents buyers, the same agent represents sellers, the same agent is a transaction coordinator, the same agent is the property manager, the same agent is the lender. Kind of reminds me of the story that I told you about the restaurant. The one person tried to be the greeter, the waitress, the chef, the busboy, the manager, everything. Very difficult to provide the kind of experience that our clients are excited to tell a friend about with that kind of inefficiencies. You think about it, no wonder that a real estate agent is often deemed one step above a used car salesman because of all those inefficiencies, right? How can they provide great experience when the average agent sells less than 4 homes a year across the United States? So every time they sell a home, they're selling a home in a new market. In other words, they're learning all the while their buyers are learning, or their sellers are learning, or their property managers are learning, tenants, landlords, right? And so if these solo agents are extremely inefficient today. Then the other thing that you see is with solo real estate agents, they have no area of specialty. Some do residential, you know, single family homes. Some specialize in commercial. Some specialize in industrial property. Some in land. Some are in offices or businesses, even business brokeraging. Some are even trying to offer financing, right? Like that's a lot of inefficiency. And then you get a license and it covers an entire state. we're in a state, you know, it takes you 15 hours to travel from the northern border of Oregon to the southern border in Mexico. Like, it takes you 15 to 16 hours to make that travel. And real estate agents are licensed for the entire state of California, typically to do all of these things that I've mentioned, and it produces a lot of inefficiencies, right? You think about it, if you had a toothache, you wouldn't want to go to a general doctor, but you'd want to go to a dentist or a specialist. And a specialist has the right products, the right tools, the right experience, the right training to help with your toothache. And if I'm going to have a tooth pulled, which is like kind of the nightmare experience at the dentist, if I'm going to have a tooth pulled, I kind of want to have a tooth pulled by someone who's pulled thousands of teeth in his life, right? Like, hey, this is secondhand to me. I could do it while I'm asleep. I could do it with my eyes closed. I don't want them to do it with my eyes closed, but they could. That's the kind of dentist that I want. So in real estate, when you have these broad regions that people cover, and solo agents are doing buyers, sellers, landlords, tenants, property management, commercial, residential, brokerages, lending, what happens is it creates massive inefficiencies in our business as a solo agent.
I've seen this on your team where even with this COVID-19 pandemic, how there's been so much new paperwork and contracts and forms, and how since you are a specialist and your team is divided as specialists, they've been able to keep on top of all the news stories, what is specific towards their specialty. And so, I mean, even just in this pandemic, you can see the benefit of that.
Well, it's absolutely right. On our team, we have buyer specialists. They are specialized. They're like that dentist that I talked about. And so a buyer who says something like, I want to buy a home in that community, my team member is able to say, that's what I do. That's what I specialize. I spent all day, all week, all month looking at homes in this community. I've got a pulse on what's happening in the market, frankly, like nobody. I've written more offers than anyone else, right? Because that's just what I do. I'm a specialist. Our listing specialists, when they show up at an appointment, they're able to say, I'm a listing specialist. You might have interviewed 5 agents, but I'm a listing specialist. I work on a team. I'm a listing specialist. This is what I do. So I have a pulse on how to price your home. I have a pulse on how to help you prepare your home for sale. I have a pulse on how to best market your property as a result of being a specialist. I don't do everything. I do one thing, but I do it a lot every day. I'm that dentist. I pull a lot of teeth. So therefore, if you have a tooth that needs to be pulled, and sometimes people would say that the real estate transaction can be felt like pulling teeth, right? They're uprooting themselves and moving into a new home and getting implants, right? So my point is that the inefficiencies of a solo agent, the team can help provide efficiencies. The vacuum that's being created by solo agent is producing both teams and technology. And that's the vacuum that we see.
So what's the answer for a solo agent? How do they know what a good team is, or if they should join a team? I like to work alone. This pandemic and sheltering in place has been okay with me.
Well, here's, I was talking to the guy who did the last webinar, Joe, and he said, Rick, you always have said that to go, and this was an old African proverb, and I've said it 100 times, to go fast, you go by yourself, but to go far, you go with others. So you have to decide which one. He said, Rick, I don't even know that's true. I said, tell me what you mean by that. He says, because actually, if you go by yourself, you make a lot of mistakes. So it looks like you're going fast, but then you hit a roadblock because you didn't, learn from others. You're doing it all by yourself, and you kind of got to back up. So it kind of felt like you were going fast. It was an illusion. It was a mirage that you were making progress, but you hit that wall and you had to step back. And we've all been there, right? Like we've all had that experience where we're moving forward and we hit a wall. We're moving really, really quick. We got to do it over again. Matter of fact, I was telling my wife the other day, I'm 44 years old. I'll be 44 in July. I'm tired of doing things twice. I don't want to do them twice anymore. So I want to have the collective wisdom of people who've done it before me. And I want to have those that are specialists in my life, because that's what they do. So we don't have to do it twice. You don't have to do it over again. If I eliminated all those things I was doing twice, how much further would I be ahead?
Mm-hmm.
And so our goal on a real estate team, we kind of parallel it to that of a flight. Like, I want to get the right people on my flight. And we did webinars in the past of how we define that. There's 3 parts for our team members. They got to be humble, hungry, and people smart. Those are my 3. And if they have those, they make it through security checkpoint. And now my job is to say, okay, what seat do they fit best on the team? Are they the best in a buyer specialist, a listing specialist, a transaction coordinator, a marketer, a concierge, a director of operation? Like, where do they best sit on this flight? And I found that when I get that right, I don't have disruptors at 10,000 feet. Like, we all have a mutual shared purpose of where we want to land. We showed up at the airport, we joined efforts, we all got on the plane together, and we have a shared purpose on where we want to land as a real estate team. By the way, I'm going to talk about that more in the next webinar when it talks about what we do as a real estate team, or some insights. And so all of that's designed to work together to have a shared purpose so that we land this plane. And, you know, just like your real estate transaction, there's turbulence along the way, right? And so, but having skilled specialists help you navigate that turbulence so that there's a safe landing and you land your team exactly where you aim to land it. You weren't aiming for LaGuardia and ended in Omaha, right? You aimed for LaGuardia, you actually hit LaGuardia Airport.
So can you tell me why you chose a team and what your team looks like?
Well, actually, I had this really unique experience. Before I started in real estate, I worked for a company called Circuit City, and I was 17 years old. And when I was hired at Circuit City, they invested a lot in this 17-year-old kid. I don't know what they saw in me. They sent me all over the country. I mean, think about it. I was 17. I wasn't even 18 years old. By the time I was 18, I had flown all over the country for this company, Circuit City. By the way, Circuit City was written about in a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great. And they flew me all over the country, invested in me, and we put together solid teams. So when I left Circuit City, and eventually Circuit City, you know the story, went out of business, then Jim wrote another book called Good to Great to Gone, and then profiled Circuit City in that book. So both books have Circuit City. And when I left and I joined the real estate business, I was shocked that everybody did everything solo, all by themselves, independent contractors. And it just was appalling to me that they didn't use synergy, because you realize very quickly when you're on the right team, Christina, you plus me doesn't equal 2, it's like 4 or 5. Now you multiply that with 50 team members and the results are astronomical, right? There's a synergy, especially if you're doing what your natural giftings are and I'm doing what my natural giftings are. And when we get that right, it's not an addition problem. It's a multiplication, right? It like multiplies. I mean, it's almost like, you know, you work with powers. You know, remember that in your math class? You used to be a teacher, Christina. I think you were a history teacher.
History.
But, you know, you'd have 10 to the 10th power, right? Like, that's what happens when you have the right team members. It multiplies your efficiency. You have the right people on the bus working on the right assignments in the right seats, and they're happy with what they're doing. And we could talk all day about what that looks like and how we do that, and maybe we'll do another webinar on that. And so when I realized that the industry wasn't operating, like literally my first transaction, I was a solo agent. This is back in 2003. My second real estate transaction, I hired help. And by the time I was done with I ended in 2005, I had my first buyer specialist. And then pretty soon we had transaction coordinators, listing specialists, and then now coaches and leads and directors of expansion through various offices. You know, and it just grows and grows and grows. And what you find is that hiring the right team member breaks you through a ceiling. So maybe you have a production ceiling. Maybe you have a motivation ceiling. Like every time, you know, you go to work, you hit this ceiling. Maybe for you, it's I can do 20 transactions or 30 transactions or 40 transactions. But you get the right talent in your life, you break through that ceiling. Then you hit a new ceiling. And then you get the right talent in your life, you break through that ceiling, and you get to the next ceiling, right? And that's what happens when you bring on the right people. There's a catalyst with that synergy. It just catapults you, it catalysts you to the next level. And so when we realized that, I started hiring, started building teams, and started working together. And then now I find I actually enjoy the people that I work with, and you included, Christina, even more than the work that I do. Like, it's shifted. It was about the work. I wanted to make sure I was doing the work the very best I can and the most efficient. Now I go to work because I love the people that I work with. They're amazing. And so when I begin to tap into that and realize, oh my goodness, to reach my goals, I can go fast by myself, but I go far with others. Nobody succeeds alone. I started bringing on team members. And then as you see that really play out, a right team member doesn't just add to your production, it multiplies your production. And all along, it provides a better experience to your clients.
Mm-hmm. So today's topic is teams and technology. So how do they combine? Where do they intersect?
Okay, so let's talk about technology for a moment, then I'll wrap up with teams. And I see we got some questions coming in, and so hang tight. Christina, remind me to kind of end about 5 minutes early. We'll answer all your questions. So if you have other questions, put them in the chat box. By the way, we're kind of an open book. If you've been on the other webinars, and in the past we've polled you and said, hey, how many people have been on our other webinars? And people watched most of our webinars or a lot of our webinars. We don't sell anything. This is just information, insight. I just speak to the heart, from the heart to your heart about, who we are and what we're doing. I hope it's helpful to you, and I hope that it helps you survive today so you can thrive tomorrow. So let's talk a little bit about technology. Zillow, the vacuum that the solo agent created a company called Zillow. And you think about it, most real estate companies, and these people are from all various companies, but most real estate companies focus their energy on the agent. And if you're an agent, you say, well, that's not a bad thing. Well, it is a bad thing because it left out the most important part of this equation, which is your customers, your clients. And without customers, nothing else matters, right? Like, you can have the best operation, but if you don't have any customers, you're out of business. You can be an exceptional dentist, the very best, but if you don't have any customers, you're out of business. So just being the best at your given industry doesn't mean that you're going to be in business and productive. You got to have customers. And I mean that because, if you think about it, up till recently, large real estate franchises and brokerages, they were all centered around the agent, and they weren't channeling through the team member to the consumer, providing value at the end of the day to the consumer. They were just providing value to the agent. And you might say that value is in training, that value is in education, that value is in mentorship, that value is in tools, resources, but it didn't go to the consumer, wasn't channeled through the consumer. And Zillow says, well, if nobody is going to help the consumer, I'll make properties easy to find, I'll make them convenient, I'll make them attractive, and I'll attract all the eyeballs. Remember, in marketing, the one who holds the eyeballs wins. Years ago, you held the eyeballs on a newspaper. Then maybe it was a billboard or a TV ad. Like, whoever holds the eyeballs wins. And Zillow began to hold the eyeballs of the consumer because things were convenient, things were easy. Remember when Zestimates came out? Like, there was an inefficiency. To get an estimate on your home value, the consumer thought, I got to call an agent. Maybe I want to talk to an agent, maybe I don't. And then Zillow comes out and says, well, go to your property on our website. We'll tell you what we think it's worth. Now, you could argue it's not accurate. Well, maybe it's not accurate, but to the consumer, there was an inefficiency. It created a vacuum. Zillow pops in and controls that vacuum. I want to show you something. I want to share my screen, and this will be very insightful for you. And if you have questions, feel free to ask them along the way. Let me share my screen. I want to show you something really interesting. This company, this is a company called Reology, and this brand holds other brands. like Century 21, Better Homes and Garden, Coldwell Banker, Sotheby's, all of that's with Realogy. And I want you to look, since 2012, the solo real estate brokerage, look at what's happened. It's gone from 2012, a $7.5 billion company, okay, all the way down to what is that? Less than $1 billion value. Now, this is, by the way, on a website called Macro Trends that tracks this, tracks a lot of stocks and various things. And so you just see the massive change, right? Like this vacuum that was created has caused the solo agent that's not operating efficiently. Average agent selling 3.9 houses a year, average agent making less than $41,000 a year across the state of California. They had inefficiency, the desire to look for property, show property, get my opinion of value. The brokerages weren't focused on it. They were focused on the agent. Look what happened to the value of the company, right? So then we take a company and let's just look. This is, by the way, based on net worth. And you could do this on your own with whatever company you're with. Then you look at Zillow. I remember Realogy, which has been around for a very, very long time, very kind of a staple in the real estate business. Realogy, who's been around for forever, that particular company dropped down to less than $1 billion. Now look, Zillow's net worth as of time of this recording, April 29th, or yesterday, is $9.41 billion. Unbelievable. Over $9 billion. So here's the amazing thing about the value of this company. Let's kind of look at what I call revenues and profits. Okay? So like, how much money are they actually making? Net income. Let's actually, what's net income? Like, how much money are they actually making? The company's worth over $9 billion. Look at this. Zillow's annual net revenue, it's in the negatives. Not only is it in the negative, when we look at where they're at, $0.3 billion negative. So they're not making any money, and yet the value of their company, the net worth of their company has skyrocketed to $9 billion, while a company like Realogy has dropped significantly from $7 billion all the way down to under $1 billion in value, and you don't even have any income being generated. So what we see is the world is changing, right? That we see this on a kind of graph here, that the net worth of these companies, these solo agent companies, are losing to technology companies that are coming in, because the technology companies are filling this vacuum that's being created because the consumer wanted something. There were inefficiencies, there were underperformance, there were a lack of customer service in these things, and these Zillow comes in and gives the customer exactly what they want. You want to know your home value? Go there. You want to search for properties? Go there. You want a little bit of artificial intelligence to help you find properties? Go there. And today, if you were to ask your clients and say, where do you go and look at homes? Where do they tell you? Do they tell you they go to the Coldwell Banker website or the Century 21 website or the Sotheby's website and look for homes? Probably not. Where do they tell you they go? They tell you they go to Zillow, and that's where they're looking for properties. So we see this massive shift from the solo agent created by the inefficiencies, this vacuum that's now created, being filled by technology. We also see this massive shift being filled by teams. Here's some stats for you, and I think you have a graph on this, Christina. This is absolutely amazing to me. Since I started our team back in 2005, that was the first time I hired a buyer specialist, and to be honest with you, I didn't even know what we were doing. I was trying to figure it out as we go. I hired an office manager, and some stayed with me for a long time, and some stayed with me for a very short amount of time, just kind of learning and growing over time. But check out what's happening with real estate teams. You know, we looked at how Zillow's value has gone through the roof to now be over $9 billion without even creating an income. Let's look at what's happening with real estate teams. By the way, in 2013, there were 1,700 teams that made over $1 million. Okay, 1,700 teams in 2013 made over $1 million in gross commission income. By 2018, there were 6,300 teams creating over $1 million in gross commission income, from 1,700 to 6,300. By the end of this year, it's projected that there'll be over 10,000 teams that produce collectively as a team over $1 million in gross commission income. So you see that the solo agent brokerages are struggling to make it. A famous real estate coach, I don't say famous, but he's a real estate coach, has said that in the next 3 years, 50% of solo brokerages will be out of business and teams are going to continue to rise. So all in all, when the tide goes out, you can tell who's been skinny dipping, right? When the tide goes out, I believe there'll be two things remaining that are protected and clothed and healthy for the market to come. And that's going to be teams, and that's going to be technology. And if you're not exploring having a team or being on a team, I really challenge you to do that, because I think it's imperative that you're not skating to where the puck once was, but you're skating to where the puck is going. And you're looking ahead and saying, where is this market to thrive? Rick keeps talking about. He talks about survive, and he talks about how we pivot, and he talks about how we thrive. Where's this market to thrive? The market to thrive is in teams and technology. We know that. And we know that those things are going to continue to grow, but we continue to see the solo agent create even more inefficiencies by the way they operate their business.
So we have about 8 minutes left.
Oh my
Went
goodness.
by really fast again. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box or the chat box. And while we wait, Rick, can you share a bit about what our next webinar will be about? This is the one that everyone has been waiting for. You've titled it The Secret Sauce, Insights to Our Team. So again, how much did your team gross annually last year? Or
We did $3.5 million of gross commission income. We were one of those 6,300 teams that produced over $1 million. And by the way, that's shared with all of our team members. Our average team member in 2018 produced $209,000 of income. And we did that because we're less about I's and me's, and we're all about the us's and we's. And, and that synergy that's created, you know, the multiplication factor that we talked about earlier. And so the next webinar, if there's one thing, I was challenged to answer this question. I had to think deeply. Like, what's the one thing that causes success in a real estate team? What's the secret sauce? What's that one ingredient you just can't do without? Like, what's the one thing you got to get right? I have boiled it down into just simply one thing, and webinar 10, which I know we're asked to do a bonus webinar, but webinar 10 is our last webinar, unless we do those bonus webinars that we've been asked to do. Like, so be on that call, and I'll define for you the one thing that we do as a real estate team that I think creates the greatest, it's the greatest recruitment. Right? Beyond what I could ever say or what our team members, like, it's the one thing that creates recruitment to our team, but it's also the one thing that creates retention. And we have some team members, and they've been with me 7, 8, 9, going on 10 years. And I would tell you it's not me or my charisma or even lack of their charisma. I'll tell you what it is. It's this one thing that I want to share with you on the next call. So when are we doing that webinar? It's Tuesday, right?
And
so
then also, yeah, and I would love for people to put on the chat box. So we have our 2 bonus ones that have been requested. The financial one, everybody just loved. And so the 2 potential bonus ones are the 4 R's of a realtor's plan to $1 million and the 5 C's to a realtor's professional development. These dates are to be determined, but we'll definitely have those set, I'm assuming, by Tuesday. So
here's what happened on one of these webinars. Somebody can say, Rick, you opened your big mouth, and I started talking about how over the last 10 years, I've been teaching real estate agents the 4 R's of a financial plan. And people have been doing it, and they've made a lot of money not only did they make a lot of money, they created what I call cash flow or passive income. And so I made that comment, and then people chimed in and said, hey, do a webinar on that. Do a webinar. What's the 4 R's? What's the 4? So we thought, well, we only scheduled 10 of them, Christina. So then I said, well, let's do a bonus webinar. And so we are going to do that webinar. And that bonus webinar, it's my plan. It's my financial plan. I didn't get it from anywhere else. I drew it out on a sheet of paper one day, sitting in a lazy boy chair, trying to figure things out, being frustrated financially that things weren't working the way that we had hoped. I drew this picture out, and since then I have sat with, hundreds of people and shared this diagram. Then they apply it to their life, and they implement that financially.
And I've sat in on it, and it's brilliant. It's so good. So it's a non-miss. You have to visit us on that webinar because it's brilliant. Rick, we have a question from Joseph. How do you determine what the right team is for you? And he says, thank you both. You're welcome, Joseph. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. I know Joseph well. Jojo's a great guy. Jojo and his son are just awesome. So Joseph, I think it has to do, and I'm not trying to kind of bait the next webinar, but it's everything to do with what I'm going to talk about next week. And without giving away every detail, there's one thing I think you have to look for in a real estate team above anything else. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. And so make sure you're on that. I know you've been on a lot of these webinars, but I'll be talking about it. I'll break it down. And I'm actually going to use a metaphor because I found that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and it helps you remember what we're doing. And kind of, if I give you a 10-point description, like, you forget about it. But if I give you a picture, you'll remember that picture. And I'll do that next week in a metaphor, and we'll use the metaphor of a tree.
Perfect. And we have one more question, and then we'll close it. How do you and your team generate referrals today?
Okay, so that is a great question, and that's from Al Anonymous. And Al Anonymous asks us a lot of questions, doesn't he, Christina?
He does. He loves us.
Okay, so here's, which I think is in part the magic of the team. Without enough customers, nothing matters. We define a customer as 5 things: name, phone number, email address. They want to buy now or in the near future, and they have not or are not an agent. That's a 5. Those are the 5 that makes it a customer. It's not a lead. It's not a contact. It's a customer. Then the customer becomes a client when they sign a representation agreement. So I would say, how do you generate referrals? I would ask, how do you generate customers? We do it 3 ways. The first way we do it, we call it I-generated business. I-generated business. Everybody does it, and I do it. Everybody on my team does I-generated business. And I-generated business is we serve those that know, like, and trust us. We do it real, genuine, authentic. We don't use heavy sales scripts or something that makes people feel awkward or weird. We're just real. We're just genuine. And I generally do it through events. We kind of put events together. For example, for the last 20 years, we've been doing birthday presents for homeless and foster kids. So we get all of our clients to come to the office. We give them an empty bag. It's a way for us to interact with the client, the customer. They come back. They bring this bag filled with birthday presents. We throw a party, and right now 1 in 3 kids in our county are going to this birthday party. We do that and have done that for literally 20 years now. And we do that because it's good to do for the community. Like, it's the right thing to do, and I kind of think that to whom much is given, much is required, and so we do that. But it also has a byproduct, and the byproduct is that it helped me connect with people on a bigger level and connect with our I business. The second thing that we have, because I told you there's 3, is we have we-generated business. By working together as a team, we got a lot of listings. We have 30 listings coming soon to the market, and we're trying to put them all on the market in the next week is what we're planning. So it's 30 of them. So our average agent might have 1 or none, and they can only, and what we found is that if a team member had 30 listings available, and all of our team members do, because we work with, it's us's and we's and not I's and me's, right? And so they can then promote that property. And then, Christina, how many social media posts do you put out? Like, within the hour, I saw a great post, 5 things that buyers should be looking at today. So we create these for our team, and we send them out in open houses. That's what we call lead generated. But the bulk of our business comes from team generated. and it's our online marketing and advertising. And right now, about 70% of our total closed business comes from the team generated. So we have I, we, and team. That's our marketing, that's our advertising, that's our reviews together, that's our brand in the community. Like that's that bulk of the business, and especially with shelter in place, that has been imperative. Now, as a solo agent, you can benefit, you can still do the I generated business. There's nothing holding you back, and a lot of people teach it as SOI, and a lot of people teach it as your sphere of influence or people you know, like, and trust. Like, you could still do that. When you're on a team, the thing that benefits you is you now get the we. So in some sense, you double your business there, and then you triple your business with team generated. And that's how we are to get our average team members' income so high, because they don't just have their I generated business. They don't just have the we generated business, the business we're working on together. They also have the team generated business. It's not when you had Joe on the call yesterday, who's kind of coordinates all that for us, or last week. And Joe coordinates all that for us, and he doesn't give leads out. Like if you go and you buy leads from Zillow or Realtor.com or wherever, you buy leads. You buy a name and a phone number, and periodically. What they do is actually schedule appointments. They vet them for you. They sell you and the team, and they put it on your calendar. They literally block your calendar with the appointment, and that's team generated business. And right now, about 70% of our business, especially with shelter in place, because we didn't put a lot of homes on the market the last 2 weeks. We didn't because, well, you couldn't show a home that was occupied up till recently. So I generated, we generated, and team generated. 3 ways we generate business. Al, I hope that answers your question. I could break each of those down. I could spend a call just on I, we, and team individually.
I think you found bonus one.
Yeah, maybe that's bonus number 3 webinar.
Oh my. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. You can go to our Facebook group, Agents Thrive, to get the latest information concerning small businesses, real estate, the COVID-19 pandemic, how it's affecting agents and consumers, customers. Rick is always posting on there. There's great advice, great information. It's something you should do, you need to do to keep current. You can also go to agentsthrive.com to register for our next webinar, learn what topics are coming up, including the bonus ones, and find recordings of past ones if you missed any of them. When this box closes, please feel free to fill out our brief survey. We want to serve you the best we can, so give us suggestions, questions, comments. If we didn't answer any of your questions, put those there and we'll have someone contact you. That's about all the time we have, so thank you for spending part of your morning with us. Rick, thank you so much for giving us your insight and your wisdom. Everybody stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you on Tuesday. Bye.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you.